What's up, everyone? My name is Prerak.
I'm Yaakov.
Yaakov and I today had an idea to create a video of 15 misconceptions relating to the entire medical school application-ish process, because that's what's happening right now.
Right now, it's the summertime.
It is, yeah.
And that's why we got our gorgeous summer shirts.
Yeah.
Where are your shades?
I don't have shades, unfortunately. I had shades before, and I just can't find them.
I'll just put them. So we should do... Oh, should I?
We have each misconception on a piece of paper, and Yaakov and I will take turns alternating it. Yeah, and then we'll basically say the misconception and like kind of rectify it in our own way. Oh, the other thing I want to say is this video is going to be in two places.
Yes.
One is on your website.
My website.
And one is on my channel.
Right. So we should introduce each other. This is Prerak. He's the genius of our class. He graduated from UC Berkeley in 2016.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes.
He is passionate about so many different things, including CRISPR-Cas9. He has a YouTube channel, lots of really cool videos. He created a board game called React. He rocks really awesome Hawaiian shirts.
That is, I do like my Hawaiian shirts.
He has a pretty dope apartment with very fun...
It's a heart.
It's a heart. Great guy, really smart, really thoughtful, great to talk to, lots of fun. Anything else that I should know?
No, that was that overcompensated so much. This is Yaakov. Yaakov is my classmate. We met again a year ago. We actually met at Second Look weekend, and he was like one of the first people I met ever at Yale. And that's how I knew from that moment it was destined to be. And we live right like 2 doors down from each other. I went to school in Canada, so for all y'all homies that always ask me if I have Canadian friends who got into medical school, Exhibit A.
They exist.
Yeah, they definitely do. Went to York University.
Nice.
Also one of the smartest people I've ever met. The most genuine person ever, which is why I think we connect a lot. We were in the same physio workshop. I think the way we bond a lot is because we always ask the same science questions.
Right.
We're always just like, but why?
We're
like,
pretty annoying in class, let's be real.
Yeah. So he has his own company as well. What is it? What is your company?
MDCoach.
MDCoach.org. We're both really into increasing accessibility for the med school applicant population, I guess.
Yes.
And I don't know, I just love him. That's all I gotta say.
I'm just gonna quickly describe MDCoach in a nutshell. This video isn't sponsored.
Yes.
I'm gonna make the disclaimer. Not sponsored by MDCoach, has nothing to do with it. The reason we're making this video is number one, to create more accessible advice. Also, I could share some of my experience. What I do through MDCoach is we try to help people get into med school. We help work on their applications. We do mock interviews. We have a nice team of a lot of really great coaches working for us. We have several people here at Yale, some people at University of Toronto. We help Canadians and Americans. Throughout this video, I'm going to be talking about a lot of experiences that I've had with my clients, a lot of common misconceptions that they have coming into the process. I'm
not paid for this at all. I'm just working with him because we both have similar goals and where we want to go, and we figured why not be synergistic here and at least help the cause in both ways. With that being said, we're going to go ahead with this video. We have 15 things that we're going to start with, and we'll work through them. Why don't we start with the first one?
The first section is pre-application, before you start even applying. So we're going to give 3 pieces of advice that apply to people who might be in their first, second, third year of college before even starting the application process, before MCAT, before AMCAS, before all of that.
All of that. So the misconception number 1. Is that in? Okay. It says be well-rounded or pointed.
Pointed. Have you heard this advice before?
I've heard the first one a lot.
Yes.
I've not heard the second one. So why don't you tell me a bit more about it and how to correct it.
Okay, let me explain the misconception. A lot of times when I was applying to medical school, I got a lot of advice from people. A lot of people said be well-rounded, and some people said be pointed, and some people said be either. What does it mean to be pointed? Well, it's kind of like the opposite of being well-rounded. Well-rounded is like check off all the boxes, research, leadership, whatever it might be. Pointed is like forget all that stuff. Focus on one thing that's your jam, and just do it to the extreme, and that'll appeal to medical schools.
Okay.
So why is this advice not the best advice?
What is the rectification here, man?
So here's the thing. There's certain aspects of your application that need to be well-rounded. You need to have a good GPA, you need to have a good MCAT, you need to have some sort of exposure to research, some sort of exposure to clinical work. So the advice to just focus on one thing isn't necessarily the best advice. On the other hand, the advice to just be well-rounded isn't the best advice either, because it can make you kind of like a run-of-the-mill applicant. If you have one thing that you're passionate about, on top of being well-rounded, that could really speak a lot to the admissions office. It can catch their attention. Your essay will stand out. Your personal statement will stand out to them. So it's I guess the best advice is
to be both.
is to kind of be both, but the most important thing to just be you.
Yeah.
So be you, but make sure you check off a lot of boxes, the important boxes, MCAT, GPA, whatever it might be. And then kind of throughout undergrad, figure out what you're passionate about, find your point, your pointedness, your X factor, and pursue that.
I've talked about this a lot on my channel.
Okay.
And I think I agree with that. You definitely have to check off some boxes, and then once you figure out what you like, stick to it.
Next one?
Yeah, next one. Go for it.
Oh, this one's fun. This one, we heard a lot.
Did we?
Publish, publish, publish.
So the misconception here, obviously, is like you need to publish as much as possible to make yourself more reputable for medical schools. Two sets here. First of all, I basically had one publication as a third author that basically is like the least significant thing. And like that was nothing at all. I didn't really know what was even on the paper. So the point here is publish, publish, publish is not necessarily the name of the game. And more importantly, especially in undergrad, you should really be learning the foundational stuff of research and not be focusing on publishing. So with that being said, a publication is still good, but a lot of these med schools will ask you about their research, ask you about your research, sorry. And if you can't explain your research, even if you have a publication, that is so much more embarrassing than someone who might not even have a publication, but is insanely, insanely passionate about like CRISPR-Cas9.
I had 0 publications, 0, but I did some research, and I was able to speak about that. I think a lot of people, when they hear that advice, gotta make sure you publish, they seek out research experiences that wouldn't necessarily be like help them develop skills, right?
Exactly.
And just be an easy publication. That's really obvious to people that are reading your application, and it's very obvious in the interviews. So just be genuine when you're seeking out research experience. Number 3.
Only think about programs once you start applying, which is already wrong. Yes, I agree. You should not be doing this. You should pre-plan.
Right. Planning is so important. It's such a tricky, the application process is so tricky. There are a lot of moving pieces. You should definitely start to do your research before you even begin the application process, even as early as your first year in college, because different programs have different prerequisites. That's a really important thing to keep in mind when picking your courses.
Yep.
It's like it could be an English course, or like a weird requirement in terms of how many chemistries you have to take and whether biochemistry counts. It's very confusing, so you should definitely look into that in advance.
And then in your 3rd and 4th year, obviously going and buying the MSAR and kind of knowing your GPA and MCAT and shortlisting some programs that meet. One thing I will point out here is there's no such thing as safeties in medical school anymore. So there's like matches and reaches. So you want to like shortlist safe schools. You want to shortlist schools that match in terms of numbers, but by no means can you take that for granted, because as we're going to get into, it's a crapshoot. And just because you have the numbers doesn't mean anything. MSAR is like the medical school admissions requirements. Basically, it's like a $20 1-year subscription, or $30, I don't remember. I've talked about it before in a lot of videos.
Okay.
And that's on AAMC's website, I think.
This next section that we're doing is all about MCAT.
Okay, cool.
Which is a terrifying...
It's MCAT a huge deal.
It's a huge deal. It's so important, but it's terrifying. It's very scary for people because they don't know necessarily what to do. What should I be studying? How should I prepare? How many months? What's going on? Hopefully we'll clear some of that up for people. Number 4. The more you study, the better you'll do. The more you study, the better you'll do. Huge misconception. I think it's the biggest misconception when it comes to the MCAT.
Because the problem with the MCAT is the MCAT is not a regurgitate test. It's not like, oh, you will, if you know more facts, you will get it right. But the MCAT, 100%, at least, even when I took the old one, is a foundational test, which means you need to have the foundations right, and almost inevitably, like the other small intricacies start falling into place. If you just memorize a bunch of facts, it just doesn't work.
If you just go to the MCAT website, they'll tell you what the test tests. They'll tell you the purpose of it. It says on the AMC website that the MCAT tests your problem solving and critical thinking. Like those are crucial aspects of the test. It's not just about knowledge, it's about skills. The way I see MCAT preparation is that there are 2 aspects. There's one aspect of making sure you know the stuff you need to know, and you talked about it has to be very fundamental. And the other aspect is the practice, developing those skills.
Exactly.
So I want to dig a little bit deeper and give some advice. Like, you've heard all of this, but what do you actually do? How do you actually study for the MCAT? It's very confusing for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So what I personally did, and a lot of people that I work with, that I advise, I tell them to go to the AMC website. There's an outline there of all the topics that you should know going into the MCAT. It's right there on the website. So I tell people, print it out and go through the list of topics, go through this outline, and if there's something that you've covered 1,000 times that you don't need to study again, just cross it off. Like Mendelian genetics for a lot of biology majors.
Absolutely.
We know that stuff. We don't need to study it again, so you could cross it off. Things that you've never even looked at ever, let's say you never took a sociology course, a lot of the sociology material will be new, you could highlight those things. And then make a schedule for yourself based on that outline. Start with the stuff you really, really don't know. And then work your way to things that are a little bit more familiar, and don't even touch the stuff that you know perfectly.
Got it.
And throughout that whole process, you should be practicing. You should be using tons of practice questions. I'd say the AMC website is probably the best resource for that, because they have actual, real MCAT questions that they've used. And it's the most accurate. Next.
Let me read this one.
This one's fun.
You'll get to
This one's
it.
fun.
This one says scam the car section.
One of the sections on the MCAT, for those who don't know, is the CARS. I think it stands for Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills. They give you passages to read and to think critically about, and they ask you questions about it. And there's so much garbage out there about like these gimmicky scams to use when tackling this section. Things like, to save time, only read the first and last sentences of the paragraphs, or skip right to the questions and then read the passage. Forget all of that. I think the CARS is meant to test your genuine critical analysis skills and your reading skills. So you should give it, your approach to the CARS section should be totally natural. Just read it, think about it critically, and then look at the questions. I think it's as simple as that. And similarly, in your practice, practice in a very natural way.
There's no getting around it. There's no like skill set. There's no magic pill. There's no like skip this, skip that. There's none of that crap. It's all like, you need to be good at reading and critical at reading. And that's something that doesn't happen overnight. That doesn't happen in 3 months that you study for the MCAT. It's a longitudinal process.
Absolutely. These are like natural skills, they're real skills, and they take a long time to develop. But let's say you don't have tons of years. Let's say you only have a few months. Let's say it's the summer that you're going to take your MCAT. What should you do? Here's what I did, and it was really, really helpful, and I recommend for other people to do it as well. There are tons of practice passages out there, both through AMC and other resources. Like Exam Crackers has fantastic practice passages.
Not getting paid for that, by the way.
No, absolutely not. I just found the quality was really, really good with these passages. So what I would do is I compiled all the AMC practice stuff from CARS and from the older section that was called Verbal Reasoning. This was like pre-2015.
That was me.
I compiled all of that from AMC, from Exam Crackers, and I set a goal to cover it to cover all those passages by the time I took my MCAT. So what I would do is, first thing when I got out of bed in the morning, before I brushed my teeth, before anything, I sat down at my desk and I did a full CARS section, just so I could develop those skills and develop that stamina. Every single week, my scores would go up. So that's one way to do it. It requires a lot of work and dedication, but these types of things don't come easy.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Number 6, still MCAT related. Study for 2 to 3 months. Have you heard this one before?
I have, but I want you to talk more about it, because this is probably more applicable to the new MCAT. And I did not take the new MCAT, so I don't really know.
But the principles still apply to the old MCAT. For those of you who are taking the old MCAT, also listen up.
Yeah, or wait, I hope no one's taking the old MCAT. If someone out there is offering the old MCAT.
It's a scam. A lot of people, they come to me and ask me, how long should I study for the MCAT? I know some of my friends study 2 to 3 months. I hear 2 to 3 months. It's like a classic thing that everybody hears. It's bad advice, honestly, because there are so many variables that go into how long you should study for the MCAT. Which courses you've taken, so what's your exposure, what's your knowledge base? Number 2, like, where are you starting from skill-wise? Like, how are your reading skills? How are your critical analysis skills? These are really important things. Also, how many hours are you willing to put in every single day to study? Here's some advice I could give you, practical advice. The best thing you could do to study to prepare for the MCAT is the first thing you do is take a practice test. It sounds scary, it's terrifying. I heard this advice from somebody else and I did it and it was awesome, but I remember it was the last thing I wanted to do because I hadn't looked at orgo, I hadn't looked at sociology, I didn't know any of this stuff, but it's very, very helpful because when you look at the results, you can see where are my weaknesses, where am I actually at?
Yeah.
How much time do I need to dedicate to studying? How much time do I need to dedicate to preparation? Absolutely. And it's really, really informative.
Yeah.
So take that test, take it very seriously, you know, go to a public library, use one of the really garbage like desktop computers, try to simulate this experience as much as possible, take all the breaks, psych yourself out like it's the real test, and then afterwards, go through the results very thoroughly and analyze it and ask yourself some tough questions about how prepared you are. And then with that information, that's what you plan your whole study preparation schedule around. Misconception number 7. Save practice tests for the end of prep.
That's so wrong in so many ways.
So many people do it.
I know, I don't know why. First of all, like, it doesn't make any sense to save the part that is the most useful in terms of your overall ability to take a test for the very end. Because one, if you suddenly start getting scores that you're not expecting and you're taking all your tests at the end, that is a huge red flag, and now you're 2 weeks away from the test and there's no way for you to rectify that. Second of all, some people will save all their tests for the end and literally then be overwhelmed and not even finish all of them. So I, first of all, would recommend interspacing them throughout your study plan, just to also see if you're improving, if what works, what doesn't work. It can kind of help guide you, but more importantly, also make sure that you can get through all the tests in a manner that's most effective.
And the best practice tests, again, are through the AMC website.
Always, yeah.
I wanted to make one more point, which could be really good to keep in mind. I think the hardest skill for people to develop and the biggest stumbling block for people for the MCAT is stamina, especially the new MCAT. I don't know how it was with the old one.
The old one was chill.
The old one was chill.
Yeah.
The new one has no chill. You're so tired by the end. I mean, I've never taken a 7.5-hour test before the MCAT.
I've never done anything for 7.5 hours in my life.
Stamina is a really important skill, and that also takes a lot of time to develop. So if you're taking practice tests throughout your whole prep process, you're developing stamina. Also, you could do the same thing with other practice materials. So if there are like random questions out there through AMC little question packs, try to like do them all on like one day. So like, you know, you would study Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday is when you sit down for 7 hours each and just do all that practice. Number 8.
The misconception is buy third-party books and resources.
Okay. So the reason this is a big misconception is that a lot of people feel pressured to spend lots and lots of money.
They're expensive.
Really expensive on a lot of these expensive resources out there. I mentioned Exam Crackers. It's not super expensive, but there's Princeton, there's Kaplan, there's these huge volumes of textbooks. There are these really expensive courses where you go in every day, you sit in a classroom. A lot of people that I coach are people who are taking the MCAT a second time. I actually have not met a single person who was satisfied with you know, sitting in a classroom. I feel like it's not the best method for studying for the MCAT, and it's so expensive. It's so expensive. So I would waste your money if you're not sure it'll work for you. If you have the ability to guide your own studying and to utilize a lot of the resources out there that don't cost an arm and a leg, like AMC resources and Exam Crackers, then do that. At Khan Academy also.
It's free.
It's free. Khan Academy's free and it's incredible. There's so
and it's
many
actually
great...
sponsored or like endorsed by the AAMC as a valid resource, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just because, you know, something costs money doesn't mean it's the best resource.
Exactly.
So, really don't feel that pressure to spend all that money.
Well, the red flag here is like, don't buy all of the textbooks from Kaplan and Princeton or all of those places. If you're going to buy textbooks, buy them from one place and that's it. I know some people buy them from like all of the places. It's just not necessary.
Right, that's definitely overkill.
Yeah.
And also, I think it gives people this misconception that they need to study a lot.
Exactly.
And they can fall into this trap of saying, okay, as long as I read through these books, I'm good.
Exactly.
But they don't necessarily focus on
the
things,
questions and the practice tests, which should be taking a majority of your time.
Exactly. And also they don't, you know, if you're following these textbooks, you're not necessarily studying things in the best order for you. Like, why are you covering biology again if you covered it before? Why aren't you spending tons of time on sociology or whatever other topic you haven't studied for? So really think critically about how you're spending your time, how you're spending your money, and study smart.
Yeah. So the next section is the most relevant, at least temporally right now, because this is all about the application, AMCAS application.
All right, we'll start with number 9. Start your AMCAS app when it opens. Whoa, what does this mean?
So we believe it or not, we did not discuss a lot of this stuff before we started. We just both assumed that we have very similar views. But okay,
and we ended up having
we
similar
do.
views.
This is a misconception, which means you should already have your AMCAS like pretty much filled out by the time it's opened. The AMCAS does not change. As you guys know, I've sent out my AMCAS application to a lot of people randomly. All of that stuff can be done like literally now.
And there are some things on the application that seem straightforward, but actually take a lot of time and a lot of introspection. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the 2 biggest sections.
Yep.
Number 1, the activity section, and number 2, the personal statement. You're supposed to list, is it 15 activities?
15.
15 activities that you've done. Extracurriculars, volunteer work, leadership, research, whatever it might be, awards,
Anything.
hobbies. That takes a lot of introspection to know, okay, what are the 15 things that I'm going to write on my application? How many hours did I do? That takes a bit of research.
And on top of that, it's also like, does it matter to me? I actually wrote on my application, like, I play basketball. And I was like, this is a big part of who I am, and like, I'm gonna pick this over like the one time I volunteered at a homeless shelter any day. And it all comes down to like, again, as he said, introspection and really seeing like, what does this mean to me, and what did I get out of it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And something I advise a lot of people to do is if you could fit it into that word count, talk about what you've learned from the experience. Talk about why it was meaningful. There are 3 particular activities that you have to designate as most meaningful, and you're going to get a longer, greater word count in order to describe why it was meaningful. But in every single one of your activities, it's a good idea to reflect, what did I learn? Why was it meaningful? And try to put that in there too, because
always.
it makes your application stand out.
Yeah.
That stuff takes time. So at this stage, whatever stage you're at, it's a good idea to start thinking about it, especially with a personal statement. That's the second part that I wanted to talk about. The personal statement, that requires a lot of reflection.
Oh, huge, yeah.
So the prompt is,
why do you want to be a doctor?
Why do you want to be a doctor? Why do you want to go to medical school?
Yeah.
That's a tough question to answer for a lot of people.
Your personal statement is the one thing that's read by every single medical school. And so whatever interviews you get moving forward are going to build off of that personal statement.
And here's some practical advice. When you start thinking about your your personal statement, think critically about your story. What are the influences that led you to medicine from a very young age even, and then talk with family members, talk with friends, ask them, was there anything when I was younger or anything now, that I did that indicated that medicine was a good fit for me, because sometimes it takes somebody else to see something that's obvious.
Absolutely.
So AMCAS opens, I think in May you could start typing into it, and then you could start submitting it at some point in June.
Yep.
In April, in March, start thinking about these things, start jotting down your thoughts. That way, you could send in your AMCAS application as soon as possible, and that's hugely beneficial. Next one, this is also relevant to your applications. Focus on what you did, number 10.
Yeah, this is very odd. I think a lot of people end up like talking about like how much stuff they did or what I did and here's how great I am, which is all great, but I think the number one thing is everyone does this. So, like, by the time, like, if you're an admissions committee reviewer, it, first of all, gets really annoying, especially if you, first of all, talk about a lot about what you did, and you don't talk about anything else. It gives a very arrogant vibe sometimes. And more important than that, medicine is a team and collaborative effort. So, as much as I would love to hear about what you did, you might also want to tell me about how it impacted you, how it impacted your relationship with others, how it ultimately contributed to helping you become a team player or maybe even a team leader.
Yeah, I tell a lot of the clients that I work with to use team-oriented and cause-oriented language. So talk about what the team did, why the cause was meaningful, the cause that you were working towards. If this is relevant, shift the language away from yourself and about the bigger picture.
Yes.
Nobody actually gives this advice. Number 11, use the words clearly, of course, obviously, evidently, or buzzwords out of context.
Well, no one gives this advice, but everyone does this.
I go through lots of people's essays, just look it over. I see this type of language all the time, also in interviews. It's just
arrogant.
Yeah.
So it's a no. It's a strong no because one, it implies that you're not even entertaining any other opinions. And 2, it implies that you think whatever it is you're talking about is obvious, which again, as you're going to see in medicine, nothing is obvious.
Humility is a theme that we're gonna touch back upon when we talk about the interviews. So important to get across.
Yep.
And I just wanted to talk about the buzzwords. Using buzzwords out of context.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with using a buzzword if it's appropriate. So if you're genuinely passionate about something, it's okay for you to use the word passionate.
Absolutely.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But don't just shove it in there. It really, it's poor taste. It doesn't come across well.
Yeah.
We have one more for application writing, and then we're gonna get to interviews.
Yep.
This is number 12. This one's fun. Don't or always write the optional essay. So this is for the secondary applications. A lot of schools have an optional essay.
Well, even the AMCAS, I think, has a section where it's like, is there anything else you want to add or something? I mean, pretty much every application you get will be like, okay, sure, whatever. Did we forget something you want to talk about? And then you'll be like, okay, maybe. Like, you have to decide if you want to write that or not.
I had some people that would say, yes, always write the optional essay. So even if it asks something that's totally irrelevant to you, write it. Figure out how to write something.
Yeah.
A lot of other people said, no, never write it unless it's like super relevant to you. The reality is, it's somewhere in the middle.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, what I tell people is, if it could give you the opportunity to share something genuine that you couldn't get across in other aspects of your application, and it's not too much of a force, then go for it. But if you really have absolutely nothing to share, nothing to add, don't go for it.
And don't go for it because think about it from their perspective, right? If they can see that you just forced an answer, you just wasted their time in reading it. In the optional essay, I always would talk about, for me, I had a very odd immigration situation going on, and so that's actually something that's never covered anywhere in any application.
I often use the optional essays to talk about my childhood. That doesn't really come across elsewhere in the application, and I find it relevant.
Interview tips.
Ooh, okay.
I like
Next section. This
tips.
is my favorite section to talk about. Interview tips.
Absolutely.
Here we go. We're on to the last 3. These are
13,
really
14,
important.
and 15. And interviews are, tough. So the misconception in interviews here is don't get stumped. The one that's most memorable to me was like Yale and a lot of other schools that do traditional interviews. They literally just want to talk to you and get to know you. So for you to go in there thinking they're trying to stump you is literally, again, shooting yourself in the foot. Because sometimes they'll ask you a question and you might think, oh my god, I don't know. I don't know. You can say, I am not sure. That's a very good question. If like a colleague, if Yaakov mentioned something to me and I was like, hey, I don't actually know what that is. Why don't you tell me about it? That's what they expect versus like if I thought Yaakov was this interviewer trying to stump me and he like is like, hey, do you know CRISPR-Cas9? And I like try to pretend I do. That just comes across as not genuine and it shows that you're faking it.
Being able to admit that you don't know something or being savvy about it can really give you the opportunity to demonstrate your humanity, your humility. You can be endearing to the interview. You could crack a joke. And they just won't want to get to know you.
Yeah. And oftentimes, if you crack a joke or do something like that, you're actually going to be the people they remember. I think one of my interviewers and I had like a 30-minute conversation about like restaurants to eat at.
Me too.
Yeah. And you might think like, why would you do that? But for me, I was just trying to talk to this person and engage in meaningful conversation.
Number 14, always give stories. I've heard this piece of advice so many times. People say give stories, give anecdotes, so you get this advice that for every experience that you've had, try to think of a story so that when they ask you about it, hey, how was your time doing research in that lab? Then you have a cool story to answer with. I think it's bad advice because if you force a story where a story doesn't really fit into the conversation, it comes across as over-rehearsed. So what I like to tell people is that sometimes it's okay to use an illustration or to not use a story at all. What's an illustration? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you worked as a teacher and you worked as a teacher for a year, you taught, let's say, middle school. And the interviewer asks you, so tell me about that experience. What was it like? You don't necessarily need to say, it was great, I'll tell you the story. This one kid came over to me, told me how much they loved me as a teacher. That doesn't sound good. You could use an illustration instead. So you could say, it would be great. I'd wake up every morning, I'd go into the class with my coffee, and I'd be welcomed with 30 glowing faces, kids eager to learn, and just to see the excitement on their faces when I teach them something new, it inspired me and it reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place.
Yeah.
That's not a story per se, but it's an illustration. You're painting this picture.
You can actually go back to your AMCAS application in this sense and think of more broadly about tell me more about your research, you want to think about like, okay, what about my research was meaningful? Research really taught me to think beyond the confines of the classroom. It taught me all the things that we don't know yet. It taught me this, this, and this. And then think about why it taught you that. And those are the broader themes, right? Like what he's just saying, like if you were a teacher, the fact is you went in every morning, saw these faces, it really got you up, you love doing it, you realize teaching is a big part of your life, and that's why you want to do medicine, because there's teaching in medicine also. If anything, stick to the broader themes and they'll be like, oh really, tell me more about that. And then you can kind of go in. If they give you the invitation to go in and tell you more about that, you can. But there's no need for you to jump in right away and give them a story when they clearly didn't ask for one.
Number 15.
Oh yeah.
Impress the interviewer.
This is just
Impress
false.
the interviewer.
This is bad advice because, again, it implies that, like, there's something to be shown in an interview. An interview is actually a really bad name for things. I honestly just think they need to rename it conversations. Because, like, the best interviews I had when I interviewed for medical school were when I made myself shake off the nerves and I was like, hi, I'm Prerak, this is me. I remember, okay, this is a great story. First half of interview season, I wasn't bringing up the fact that I had this YouTube channel. I wasn't talking about this board game that I built, because I was like, it's a board game. It's not related to medicine at all. No one cares about games. And so I never brought those up, because I was like ashamed of them to a certain extent. Even though I loved doing them, they were both very big parts of my identity, but I was like, this is not gonna come across well. And then my second half, I was interviewing at like, and this, I have to mention the schools here, because I interviewed at Harvard and Yale. And at Yale, when I brought both of those up, it was amazing the response I got. They were like, what do you mean you have a YouTube channel? I was like, oh, but, and then I got to like talking about it. I was like, it's really fun because I love teaching and this gives me a way to teach, and it's also a way for me to like access people I might not have access to. And they were like, wow, this is really cool stuff. And on top of that, it's something that they could see I was very passionate about. And those were some of the best interviews I had. If you genuinely feel you had a connection, you had a good conversation, and you were yourself, like I felt like Prerak when I interviewed here, and so when they accepted me, I felt even better because they were like, they accepted my YouTube channel. They accepted like this stuff that I told them about that I was like,
they liked me for me.
Exactly. It was great.
What I like to tell people is that you have 3 goals in an interview in this particular order. Goal number 1, exactly like you talked about, you should want to connect with the interviewer. If there's no connection, they're not going to remember you. They're not going to fight for you in that committee meeting when they're talking about applicants. It's really important. And it's not necessarily an easy thing to figure out how to connect with somebody. That takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of social skills. You got to figure out the right things to say, what they seem to be interested in. You have to be savvy about it. Number 2 is you need to demonstrate that you're a good fit for the school. You know, if the school is looking for a variant, you know, like let's say they want researchers, then, you know, do you fit that type? Or if they want people who are, you know, come from many diverse backgrounds, what kind of backgrounds do you bring? So you have to figure out what the school looks for. A lot of top tier schools look for people who have a lot of promise to be leaders in the field in the future. And that would be a very important thing to demonstrate in the interview.
Exactly. Only
Then, after those first 2 goals, your third goal should be, I guess, talking about the things that you've done, giving them some ammunition to work with, so when they're fighting for you in that meeting, when they discuss the applicants, they have what to work with. They can say, oh, this person did this, it was really cool, this person did that, it was really cool. But if you didn't connect with the interviewer, if you're not a good fit for the school, then it's pointless.
To have that ammunition.
Absolutely. Yep. So your goal going into the interview should not be not getting stumped, it shouldn't be impressing the interview, it should be making that connection.
Yeah, almost inevitably that ends up giving a great interview. Thanks for the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe. I'll link Yaakov's website down below, and I will also link a bunch of other videos I've made about medical school below, because I've done personal statement videos, AMCAS videos, I've done like everything, because that's what I did last year when I had time. So all those will be linked below. Use those to your benefit, and I hope this has massive benefit for all of you.
Yes.
Yes.
I wish I heard these things when I was applying.
Yeah, me too. All right, bye.
Bye.
Perfect.